Hello and welcome back to Karma Stories. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today, I have some stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit that all come from the same OP. These are military stories and I think you're really going to enjoy them. Before we start today, I want to remind you that we moved the Karma crew over to Patreon and I'm about to release an epic pro-revenge story over there that is extremely long and definitely cannot be posted onto YouTube. So that one's going to be over on the Patreon. You can join over there at patreon.com/karmastories. I look forward to seeing you over there. I look forward to seeing your reactions to this epic long pro-revenge story that is just too much for YouTube. It's going to be pretty crazy. All right, on to today's stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Reaper Canadian. Why are you wearing a white hat? You're not a supervisor. So this story happened around 2003 or 2004. I was in the military working for a new boss who was afraid to look incompetent. I understand his position, but the equipment we were working on isn't used anywhere else in the world, so there's no reason he should have been self-conscious about it. Literally, everybody posted into this job is starting from ignorance of the kit in question. For your knowledge, we are technicians. Our job is fixing electronics and performing third-line maintenance, board level, replacing components on equipment. The equipment we were working on are 1.5 metric ton cameras used to acquire telemetry information from our aircraft on bombing ranges. They're really old though, like they were installed in the late 60s. Due to this, we needed to start trialing a new system. So the government opened up contracts and a bid was won. We were finally going to get upgrades. At this point, I was an expert on the systems. Our boss went on a leadership course required when you reach his rank, and he dumped everything he had on his plate onto the lap of his second in command, who was understandably frustrated. I offered to take on the biggest project so there would be less to do, and because I wanted to show I had the skills, he agreed. So I contacted all of the necessary people, PMed, supply, engineers, and transport, in order to orchestrate the removal and disposal of these cameras. After 2 weeks of careful planning and research, we were ready to go. The 2IC grinned at me on the day of the move and says, "Grab the white hat, this is your project, you're in charge here." Beaming with pride, I grabbed the site supervisor hard hat, throw it on, and start the ball rolling. Everything is going well and according to plan. The dome housing the camera has been cut off, and the truck with crane arm capable of lifting up to a metric ton is on site. I am about to go dismantle the camera. They're capable of being split into 3 pieces, all weighing under a ton each, when my boss gets out to the range. It's his first day back at work after his course, qualifying him to be a leader for his troops. Instead of asking for a brief as to what's happening or just letting it play out, he decides to puff out his chest and display his newfound levels of authority and command. Loudly, in front of everybody, he says, "Why the F are you wearing a white hat? You aren't the Master Corporal." Turning red with embarrassment and not having much of a spine back then, I capitulate and apologize, attempting to stammer out that I was assigned this task. He cuts me off. "Whatever, take it off and get back to work." He exchanges hard hats with me, and I'm wearing my yellow worker hat now. He's wearing the white site supervisor hat. Smugly content, he turns to me and says, "Carry on." Here's the malicious compliance bit. I'm the one who did all of the work. I know exactly what needs to be done next. As the person with all of the information, the reason I was supervising it should be obvious. So I decided it was time for some malicious compliance. He wanted to embarrass me in front of everybody. Turnabout is fair play, my friend. I nodded and said, "No problem, boss. What do you want me to do?" He said, "Keep removing the camera." "I'd love to. How do I do that?" My vapid response came back. "As you are the site supervisor, I'm awaiting your instructions on how to proceed. What exactly would you like me to do next, boss?" He turned beet red as he realized this means he would have to publicly state that he, in effect, chewed me out for supervising the project I put together, as I should have been doing. He swore at me a bit and waved his hand saying, "Just finish the job," turning more red by the minute as higher ranking people caught on to what had just happened. So they started clustering around him, asking pointed questions about the project and process. The absolute glee I felt when the range chief asked him where we were bringing the cameras, and the look on his face as he realized he was going to have to call me over to answer the questions was priceless. But not as priceless as the malicious gleam I caught in the chief's eye when he turned to me. It said, "I understand. I've got your back." This guy just made it completely obvious that when you go to a course and they give you a piece of paper stating that you've completed the course, you don't necessarily actually learn anything. I think the only thing that could have been better on this one would have been if the range chief walked up to Master Corporal, took the white hat off of his head, and handed it back to OP. That would have been absolutely wonderful. Alright, OP updated this one a couple of times with a couple of extra posts down in the comments. Here is the first one. It says, "Because a couple of people asked for more about this guy, I'll post a second story. And yes, there are more than this." So this is the same guy from that story. I'm just a lowly corporal and he's my supervisor. The year is either 2003 or 2004. It was a long time ago, but it was definitely one of those two, and it's summer. The equipment we work on are called theodolites. They're big ride-on cameras that weigh 1,440 kilograms. They weigh around 3,168 pounds each. They're housed in fiberglass domes that protect them from the elements, and they're used for data acquisition with respect to air weapon systems. My buddy and I are working on a dome controller, which is basically just a motor that's synchronized to the servos inside the camera, so that when the camera turns, the dome turns with it, so the camera can keep pointing out the opening at the aircraft. We've been working at this particular dome controller for a couple of hours, and we think we have the fault narrowed down. Enter my new boss on his first day of the job. He strolls in the door of the shop, which is right beside where my buddy and I are working. He introduces himself to us and asks what we're working on. I fill him in, letting him know that it's a dome controller, which is why it's over by the door, the only place in the shop we had 3-phase power. I explain it briefly, and he nods sagely before confidently stating, "I'm pretty sure it's just your current limiter." Now, this is unique technology in that it's old from the late 60s, and much of it had been entirely replaced over the years as components were swapped out. It's altogether possible he's worked on something similar, but these are unique pieces of kit. I comment, "The problem isn't the current, the problem is that it's lagging behind the synchros by about a second. I don't think the relay is engaging in time, which I think points to an issue in the timing circuits." Ignoring this, he says, "I've got a ton of experience working on equipment like this. I know what I'm doing. Time for some malicious compliance." I comply and step back to let the professional at it. He doesn't even bother hooking up a multimeter, but instead starts turning pots randomly. A pot is a potentiometer, which for the non-tech savvy here means he's basically effing with the internal tuning of the system. Potentiometers are variable resistors that control how much current is flowing through a system. Dimmer switches are an example of them in action. Now imagine somebody just started randomly turning several of them inside a system that deals with high current moving hundreds of pounds of fiberglass, and then picture what happened when he turned it on to see what would happen. The main transformer caught on fire from the current overload. It was a 13-lead transformer that was basically the brains of everything happening in the controller. And the best part, the company that made it went out of business 3 years before I was even born. When the sergeant asked us what the heck had happened, I pointed out that his newly promoted Master Corporal had decided to show us how to repair something we were already experts at by setting it on fire. We had to custom order a 13-lead transformer from a company, and the Master Corporal never touched my equipment again. There is one more malicious compliance story about this guy. I'll post that one a little bit later when I have some time. I'm off to lunch. In the comments for this update, we have one from a user called Nobody Noticed Me. It says, "Seems you've had a number of bosses that haven't figured out the first lesson of command. Find out who the heck actually knows what they're doing and ask them to get it done. And if you're smart, watch and learn. And if you're stupid, just tell them to report back when it's ready." OP responded and said, No, that was the same guy over and over again. My other bosses weren't incompetent. One of them was lazy when it came to doing cleanup, but that's about it. Now, further down in the comments for this update, there was somebody who decided to challenge OP on their knowledge of electrical stuff, and OP absolutely destroyed them in the comments. It's so long, it would probably take half an hour just to read that comment exchange, but I just want to let you know for more context that OP definitely knows what they're talking about, and for anything electrical, I would absolutely defer to them and their knowledge. Alright, so we're going to get into OP's part 3 right now, and the really fun part about part 3 for me is that OP was stationed in the town that I live in. Really cool. So this one says, so this time I'm talking about a boss I had in 2011. I'm stationed in Trenton, Ontario this time, and I'm working on a system called the MPN-25, which is a mobile radar system which can be deployed, set up, and fully functional. At least on paper, the reality is a little different, but that's tech stuff, anywhere in the world in under 48 hours. You're going to need to understand two things to understand this story. First, PAR means Precision Approach Radar, and it is in reference to the elevation of an aircraft. There are a lot of these little things called TR, Transmit Receive modules, in the PAR array, which interpret the radio wave the radar sends out so that it can tell how high an aircraft is. And by a lot, I mean somewhere in the range of 110 plus. I can't remember the exact number. The second thing you need to know about this radar is that the PAR array isn't a moving part. It uses beams to register the target, so the TR modules are absolutely critical in determining where the aircraft is in relation to the ground. Okay, now that's out of the way. We had an issue with some of the TR modules near the bottom of the PAR array, and when one of those modules dies, it tends to pull down the gain in the other modules around it. So troubleshooting to find out which module is the problem can be problematic. Or so I was taught. We're going to come back to this. This boss had given me a speech when I arrived at the unit that the radar I was working on would take a year to get comfortable on before I knew what I was doing. Also, the radar is under warranty, so all we can do is pull boxes, no third line maintenance. As a qualified third-line tech, box-level fault finding is a joke, especially considering this is a giant radio, and I just came from a place where I was the radio subject matter expert. I responded with, I'm looking forward to it, boss. You should know that I'm an expert in radios though, so you'll be able to employ me on the radar much faster than that. His response stunned me. Radars have nothing to do with radios. For the record, radar is an acronym. It stands for Radio Detection and Ranging. So I'm brand new to the unit, and my supervisor doesn't understand the principles behind radar. Great. So remember the TR module problem? I realized my boss isn't going to be able to impart anything useful to me, so I start reading the radar books. Nothing new to learn here outside the software, since radars are essentially schizophrenic radios that are constantly screaming, "What the F was that?" every single time it detects something in its sweep. I've read the manuals. I have some grounds for troubleshooting. I start by running what's called a max power calibration. All this does is run each TR module to load limit, and it shows you what kind of power they put out. Anything around, if I recall correctly, 100 decibels was considered good. Usually, when a module busts, the final amplifier stage is the culprit, and you'd see a return on max power calibrations that topped out around 60 to 80 decibels. That was the sign the module needed to be replaced. I had gotten to work and was about to extract the 5 bad modules we had in the array when that boss comes strolling in. Now, in the PAR array, there's over 100 of these little modules. Controlling each cluster of modules is an interface card, 5 total, connecting in series and in parallel, and it's responsible for like 23 or 24 modules each. I suspect the problem with these modules is actually the interface card, because even though I've replaced the TR modules, the fault is persistent. Again, I've already run a max power calibration. My boss suggests that I remove the connectors between the interface cards because if I don't, I'll blow up every TR module connected to the array. I disagree because the manuals indicated that removing the ribbon cables also removes the alternate grounding paths, and an NS interface card will do exactly what he's saying if it already has a bad ground and no redundancy. He looks at me pointedly with that look parents give unruly kids and said, "I've been here for 4 years. You need to remove the ribbon cables connecting to the interface cards. Don't argue with me. Finally, we're on to malicious compliance time. Alright boss, your call, you're the supervisor. Would you mind being the one to run the cow? I'm not comfortable doing something I think will destroy the array, I responded. Sure, he snapped out, confident in his knowledge, but be ready to apologize when you're wrong. He runs a max power calibration with the interface cards not linked. Lo and behold, the bottom 20-something TR modules link to IC5 fry. Reportedly, these cost around $11,000 each, making this fault somewhere in the $250,000 range. He left the radar building so I could fix the fried array, and about an hour later, the PAR array was up and running, with over half of our spare modules used to repair it. Jumping down to the comments on this update, we have one from a user called the True Dr. Pepper. It says, how did he survive so many expensive screw-ups? OP responded and said, the same way every Master Corporal does, by relying on corporals to fix their F-ups and make them look good. Master Corporal in the Canadian Forces is basically a rank that likes to pretend they don't need to work on things. Good Master Corporals understand that their job is basically training others to replace them for when they get promoted to Sergeant, and it's to act as a shield between senior leadership and the workforce, middle management, if you will. Not a lot understand this, and it varies by trade in the military. A Master Corporal in the infantry has vastly different responsibilities than a Master Corporal in the ATIS trade. You know all those stories you see on the news about military defense budgets being so high? Stories like this are a good part of the reason why that budget needs to be so high. So, I was never in the military myself, but I've learned a lot from these stories and the fact that I live in the town with Canada's largest Air Force base. I believe that if I were in the military, I would have a wonderful career if I just kept my mouth shut and did what I was told by the people above me. It sounds like you absolutely can't get discharged from the military if you just do what you're told. Alright, OP has one more story and it's kinda related but kinda not. It's titled, Can You Hurry Up Please? I'd Like to Go Home. So this story happened at my first posting again, Cold Lake, Alberta. Except this time it wasn't the boss from the other post, but rather my first boss ever in the forces. Friday cleanups involved sweeping, mopping, lunch, then wash the vehicles and drive back to base. Unless it was crappy weather, then we washed the vehicles at base. So we're on to a regular Friday in the summer of 2002, and everybody except me, my boss, and the other two Master Corporals are out at the range in the shop. Why so many supervisors for just one guy? We had a mission that morning, so we needed 2 teams on the ground. Our Master Corporal from the telemetry section came out to assist. After the mission was over, we broke for an early lunch and prepared for cleanup. Now, I was expecting that since I was the only private there, I hadn't been promoted to corporal yet, the Master Corporals would grab some brooms and mops and help out. Instead, they all sat around talking. No biggie, we all have to pay our dues, right? If they're not in a hurry, then I'll do it all. And I don't even feel bad, like I'm being singled out, because nobody else is here. That is, of course, until my boss glances at his watch and makes the offhand remark, hey buddy, you gonna be at this all day? We need these floors mopped before we can get out of here. You know the rules. I pointedly looked at the 3 mops to their right, my left, just sitting there untouched, while I'm mopping a bay large enough to drive 2 vehicles in side by side, which also houses a giant camera you can sit on and swivel around. I'm looking at probably 45 minutes worth of mopping minimum. I didn't even return a snide remark. I simply said, yes, Master Corporal, and proceeded to painstakingly mop every single inch of the floor, changing the water out every time it turned gray, like every 2 minutes, to ensure I did a thorough and complete job. It took just over 90 minutes to complete, and we hadn't even gotten down to washing the vehicles, which they could have done in the vehicle bay while waiting. The best part was that my boss, who spent the ride back berating me for how slow I was being, reacting to me, reminding him we still needed to wash both trucks. Being the only private, this dawned on him that I was likely going to take us to well after 4 that afternoon if he left me to it. He was right, I would have made those vehicles sparkle with my attention to detail, and decided to show me how to do it quickly after that. In short, this guy wanted to get out for the weekend at noon, but due to his own laziness and sense of entitlement, ended up leaving shortly after 3. We were still off early, but about 3 hours later than he was planning. Minor revenge, but as a private, I was willing to take what I could get. Jumping to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called PN Gwyn. It says, I like the way you tell these stories. Also, 2 thumbs up for doing exactly what you were told to do and messing with your supervisors by simply following orders. I find it quite interesting that in a ton of the military stories that we see on Reddit, whether it's from the US or Canada or basically anywhere else in the world, is that they're constantly working with systems that are like 60 years old. I know there's a bunch of new technology out there as well that's bloody expensive, but it does seem to me like most of the militaries in the world are working on technology from way back when, and it's still working, as long as the people there know how to fix it. Alright, we're going to end this one here. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us on your favorite podcasting platform, and if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really does help us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.